Hey everyone, John Martinez here with Midwest Revenue Group, and in today's training I want to talk to you about something called the salesperson's box. And I'll explain exactly what this means. And to do so, I want to kind of start by painting a picture for you. So I want you to think about something. I want you to think about when a salesperson calls you. This might be on your cell phone, it might be at your office or at home, but just think of when a salesperson calls you. You know, think specifically of some type of telemarketer. Now that you've got this person in mind, I want you to ask yourself this question. How long until you know? How long from the time you pick up that phone until you know this is someone trying to sell something? This is a telemarketer. This is a salesperson. How long? Now, when I ask this question, usually I hear answers like, 2 seconds, 1 second, a fraction of a second. And usually it's really right around the 1 second mark is how long it takes us to identify this person. So once you get this call and you immediately start thinking, oh, geez, another telemarketer, what are you thinking? What's going through your mind? I want you to think about it. I want you to ask yourself, what is it that goes through my mind that second that I recognize this person as being a salesperson or a telemarketer? Usually, the first thing you're going to think of is what you say. We all have those fallbacks, or kind of our default mode when it comes to telemarketers. For example, when I get a call from a telemarketer, I go right into, I just kind of wait until they pause to take a breath. And I go right into, hey, listen, I'm really not interested. Please remove me from your list. That's my default, right? I say that within the first few seconds, really without even thinking about it. It comes just so naturally. You know what? It's the same for most people, right? Now that you're thinking about those calls, aren't you really kind of in autopilot from that first second on? The second you recognize, oh, this is a telemarketer, don't you kind of go into autopilot without even thinking about it? Those, whatever you typically say, whatever your default telemarketer response is, it comes out without you even having to think about it. You know what? When you start to think about it, this telemarketer or the people who call you, they never really have a chance, do they? Well, this is the same with your prospects. This is the same whether you call them, you meet them face to face, you email them. Your prospects can go into autopilot that easy too, okay? And really, they treat others, they'll treat you the same way you treated that telemarketer. And what that really means is they're usually there before you even begin, right? You think you're just getting warmed up. You think you're just jumping into a call. You think you're just jumping into a conversation, whether it's on site with the prospect face-to-face or over the phone. And really, when you think they haven't made up their mind and you're just starting to get into things, they're already there. They're already in autopilot. And it's not because they're bad people, right? Because you and I do it too, right? You and I do it too, and we receive those phone calls. Think about this scenario. You walk onto a car lot. You got every intention of looking for cars. Maybe you're seriously thinking about buying. Maybe you're just looking around. But as soon as that car salesman approaches you and says, hey, what can I do for you? Now I want you to think about exactly what you say. Now, I ask this question as I speak all over the country, and I've probably asked this question, 100 or 200 times. And every time I ask this question, I get the same response, probably the same response you're thinking of right now. And that's, hey, just looking. No matter whether you're seriously looking, just going for a stroll through the lot, whatever it is, it's something like, hey, just looking. Basically, leave me alone, right? Now, what this means is shields are up, ears are off. Why do we just say, hey, I'm just looking? Why is that our default when we meet with the car salesperson? Well, here's the deal. We are usually afraid as prospects, and the same as our prospects that we deal with, that we try to sell to. We usually think, hey, this guy's going to either waste my time or try to take advantage of me, or I don't want to go answer his questions or get ripped off or get a bad deal. You just don't want any part of it. So shields are up, ears are off. You're in autopilot before you even know what happened. It's so automatic. So that's the same way your prospects treat you, and they don't even know they treat you that way. They don't even know they do it. Their shields go up, their ears go off when you call them, when you meet them face to face, when you email them. They don't know what's happening because it's autopilot. The same way you don't know what's happening when you get that call from a salesperson or meet with a salesperson. So here's the deal. There's a lot of freaking people out there that you can help. Because before the sale even starts, your prospect's in autopilot and you've got to overcome that. Now that you're thinking about that, how much money do you think that's cost you? Do you think you might have lost a deal because you never got over that hump? You started at a severe disadvantage and you just didn't make it over that hump, right? So let me ask you this question. What if you always stayed out of that salesperson's box? And that's why I call it the salesperson's box. As soon as your prospect identifies you as a salesperson, you're in the box. They're on autopilot. Shields up, ears off, right? So what can you do? What do you think would happen if you were never in that salesperson's box again? If you could prevent yourself from even getting put in that category? Do you think you'd make a little bit more money? Do you think you'd have a little bit less stress? Well, I want you to imagine this. Imagine if your prospects just always told you the truth. If they never held anything back and they never misled you, do you think you'd sell more? Well, if your answer is yes to this question, then let's talk about what you can do about that. Let's talk about what you can do to stay out of that salesperson's box. We call it pattern interrupt. It has a name, right? Just like it sounds. We want to interrupt that pattern where you say one thing and it triggers your prospect to put you in that box and start treating you the same way he or she treats really every salesperson, every sales scenario that he or she walks into, right? So in order to interrupt this pattern, we first have to do this. We got to identify what triggers autopilot. Really what triggers autopilot is whenever you do or say something or look a certain way, anything you can do or say really that's very similar to another salesperson that they've dealt with. Now this could be things like tone of voice. This could be just the way you approach, right? The way you walk or make a phone call, whatever that approach is, whatever the beginning of that sales call is. This might be your appearance, right? The way you dress or how you look. This could even be the questions you ask or the attitude you have, your demeanor. It might be your agenda when you tell them what you're going to do or what you want to accomplish, or you strike up that conversation and you say, hey, here's what I'd like to do. The bottom line is this. It could be a ton of things. It could be anything under the sun that links you to that typical salesperson. So what you have to do is the exact opposite. All those things I've mentioned, you got to do the opposite. You don't want to sound like another salesperson. You've got to sound like the complete opposite. So let's talk about actionable items. What does this actually mean? This means be reluctant to do a deal. What does every salesperson do? They're always trying to close you. They're telling you how sweet their deal is. They're really shoving features and benefits down your throat, right? Hoping that you catch on to one and go, yep, that's for me. I want to buy. So be a little bit reluctant, right? In the real estate world, it's going to sound something like, hey, listen, I'd love to take a look at the house. I don't know if it's an exact fit for what I'm looking for yet, but I promise you this. If it's not, as soon as I find out, I'll tell you. I look at a lot of houses. I buy a lot of houses, but I'll tell you, I definitely don't buy every single one I look at. So if for some reason I can't buy yours, I'll definitely let you know. Be a little bit reluctant to do the deal, okay? Stop selling, right? Do the opposite of a salesperson. Don't be selling from the first moment you talk to someone or you meet with someone. You also want to answer a little unexpectedly, right? What does that mean? Well, maybe someone's going to ask you something like, hey, why should I do business with you? Well, stop and think. What would the typical salesperson answer? You're going to start to say how you can beat your competition, right? We do this very well. We're super quick. We're the best at this. Don't do that. Answer unexpectedly. Answer with something like, you know what? I'm really not sure we're the best fit for you yet. I'm not sure we are the company you should do business with yet. Is it okay if we dive just a little bit deeper? Really kind of talk about what you're trying to accomplish so we can find out if we even are better than anyone else that you might do business with. And then you can move on and start selling, but you always want to answer unexpectedly. You also want to assume a no, right? Instead of always pushing for a yes, the ABCs of closing. Now, we've all heard of the ABCs of closing, right? Always be closing. The ABCs of selling, that is. Well, you know what? It's false. It's been proven time and time again that the more times you ask for a sale, the least likely you are to get it. This was just really driven home and finalized by Neil Rackham's study of 35,000 sales calls over 12 years. He found in industries across the board, again, 35,000 sales calls over 12 years, that the more a salesperson asked for the close, the more they asked for the business, the less likely they were to get it. So always assume a no. This also gets into stuff like psychological reactants and some other triggers that's actually going to really help you out in the sales process, but assume your prospect's going to say no instead of pushing them towards that yes. You want to challenge your prospect, right? Are you sure this is even what you're looking for? Why not just hold on to the house? Why not just list it? Why not just rent it out? Challenge them a little bit. Why? They're not expecting you to. You're staying out of the salesperson's box. And as long as you stay out of that salesperson's box, you can almost ask whatever you want without them misleading you. You know, we don't want those shields up and the ears off. As soon as that happens, you're at a severe disadvantage. The communication stops. So you constantly stay out of that box while digging for information, asking the questions you're going to ask anyways, but doing it in such a way that you're not pigeonholed as that salesperson and treated like that salesperson. Why don't you want that? Because usually that means shields are up, ears are off. That translates to, I'm going to be reluctant. I might even be a little hostile with you. I'm not going to answer your questions. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. And when we're being treated like that, when we don't have the whole story, it's very difficult to sell. You might even want to change up your phone intro, right? And by that I mean, you might want to be a little bit uncomfortable or just not even use the same words as every telemarketer. You know what? Don't call someone and say, hey, how are you doing today? Is Mr. or Mrs. Smith home? That sounds like a telemarketer, right? You know what? Do the opposite. Be uncomfortable. It might sound something like, hey, listen, this is John. I don't even know if I've got the right number here. Do you happen to have a house for sale? That right there will jumpstart you, kickstart you right into that sales conversation, and you just managed to stay out of that salesperson's box. Why? Because you were a little uncomfortable? Because you started out not so forceful, right? No generic, hey, how's your day? Just as a filler that most telemarketers do. Again, just do the opposite of a typical salesperson. I start every sales call personally with, you don't need what I have. I literally say it. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't hide it. I'll get on the phone with the prospect and I'll say, listen, before we even get started, I've asked around about you. I reviewed your website. I know a little bit about your business at this point. And basically from what I see, I don't think you need my help. That's how I start every sales call, by putting the prospect on their heels. I stay out of that salesperson's box. I mean, look at me. I'm a sales trainer. Don't they expect to be sold from the get-go? I've got to get out of that box immediately with the snap of my fingers, and that's how I do it. I start every call with, hey, thanks for taking it, but I might be able to save us some time here. I reviewed A, B, and C, and I'm not sure I can help you. I think you're doing just fine without what I provide. And you know what? That approach has made me some pretty significant money. It works. I stay out of the salesperson's box. Now I do a lot of little things like that, but that's a game changer right there. So I want to ask you this. What would your business look like if you were always out of that salesperson's box? If you always interrupted the pattern and made sure that those shields never went up and those ears never went off? If you could do that, what do you think that would feel like? Just those conversations alone. Forget the outcome. Just think about the sales conversations. Would that be a little easier, a little less stress, a little more enjoyable if you didn't have that awkward back and forth where they're just really holding their cards close to their chest and you're digging for information and you're just not able to get it? Forget whether or not you sell more. Wouldn't that just make your job, the whole process, a little bit easier? Do you think it would make your prospect feel a little bit more comfortable too? Ask yourself that. Well, if you want to find out, go ahead, use pattern interrupt.